Let's see, what am I missing here? Oh yeah. Hat, check. Sunglasses, check. Pepsi, check. Notes, check. Sources, check. And thick skin, check. Let's go. Welcome back to Going Unbloated, everybody, and all we do here is college football. So if you're a college football fan, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button. And as always, feel free to send gear to represent you and your team. Look around. That's what my background is made of. So if you want to be a permanent part of Going Unbloated and my background, send gear to represent yourself and your team to P.O. Box 360, Liberty, South Carolina 29657. You know, there's bad teams in college football, and then there's really bad teams. I'm talking like bottom 15, bottom 10 bad teams. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's video. I've actually had to expand my bottom 10 list into the bottom 15 list. There are so many bad teams in the Power 5 conferences. And yes, I will do a separate video on the worst teams in the Group of 5 conferences as well. But this one, I'm sticking to the Power 5. I mean, if I went Group of 5, my gosh, I might have to go bottom 30. First up, the teams that barely missed the list, but I'm keeping my eyes on. The first one, Texas A&M. Their stock is falling. Now, they're 3-3, and they barely lost on the road to number 1 Alabama 24-20. So they did have a good showing against the number 1 team, but they're averaging 21.5 points per game, which is 109th, and allowing 18.8 points per game, which is 28th. They are a bad team, but not bad enough to make the list. Next team, Nebraska. They actually missed the list. Their stock is actually rising. They're 3-3. They won at Rutgers 14-13. They're averaging 28.5 points per game, which is 77th, and allowing 29.3 points per game, which is 91st. Next team that barely missed the list is Wisconsin. Stock is rising. 3-3. They did win at Northwestern 42-7. They're averaging 31.8 points per game, which is 56th, and allowing 19.5 points per game, which is 32nd. Next team, Rutgers. Their stock is falling. They might end up making the list. Right now, they're 3-3. They lost to Nebraska 14-13. They're averaging 22.8 points per game, which is 104th, and allowing 22 points per game, which is 46th. Rutgers will probably make the list in the future. Next team, Indiana. Stock also falling. They're also 3-3. Lost to number 4 Michigan 31-10, averaging 24.3 points per game, which is 97th, and allowing 30.5 points per game, which is 98th. Indiana probably will make the list. Iowa State is the next team that barely missed the list. Their stock is also falling. They're 3-3. Lost to number 20 Kansas State 10-9. That looks more like a baseball score. Averaging 23.2 points per game, which is 103rd, allowing 13.7 points per game, which is 8th. That reminds me of another team. I'll get to that team later on. Next up is Baylor. Yes, I'm actually keeping my eyes on Baylor. They are safe for now. They're 3-2. They were on a bye week this week. They're averaging 37.4 points per game, which is 26th, allowing 20.6 points per game, which is 37th. So they do have decent statistics. However, the reason that they're on this list is the next game they play a bad team on the road, West Virginia, and if they lose that game, they just might make the list. Next team, Georgia Tech. That's right, Georgia Tech is off the list. Their stock is rising. They're 3-3. They beat a good Duke team 23-20. They're averaging 17.3 points per game, which is 123rd. It used to be worse. As bad as that is, it used to be worse, and allowing 28 points per game, which is 81st. Stats not good, but they're getting better because the last 3 games. Next team is Louisville. They missed the list barely. Their stock is rising just a little bit. They're 3-3. They beat Virginia 34-17. They're averaging 27.7 points per game, which is 80th, and allowing 22.3 points per game, which is 47th. But you're safe for this week, Louisville. Next team on the list is Cal. Their stock is falling. They're 3-2 on their bye week, averaging 25.8 points per game, which is 91st, but allowing 22 points per game, which is 44th. But I have a sneaky suspicion that Cal will make the list in the future. Next team that barely missed the list is Notre Dame. Stock is rising. They're 3-2. They beat number 16 BYU 28-20, averaging 25.6 points per game, which is 93rd, and allowing 23.2 points per game, which is 52nd. You're safe for now, and if you keep playing like you did this past Saturday, you should be safe for the rest of the year. Next team that barely missed the list is Texas Tech. They have fallen. Their stock is falling. They're 3-3. They lost at number 7 Oklahoma State 41-31, averaging 34.3 points per game, which is 39th, and allowing 29.8 points per game, which is 95th. I still think Texas Tech is a good team, but if they keep losing, they're going to end up on the list. Last team that barely missed the list and hasn't made the list so far, however, their stock is falling. Vanderbilt. That's right. They haven't made my worst 10 or 15. Right now, they're 3-3. They lost to number 9 Ole Miss 52-28. They're averaging 33.2 points per game, which is 44th. So they do have a decent offense, but they're allowing 36.8 points per game, which is 122nd. That defense might land you on my bottom 15 or bottom 10. Now on to the actual list. And yes, I have 15 this week. Hopefully, I can shrink it back down to 10. But there's so so many bad teams, I have my bottom 15 this week. Number 15 is going to be Iowa. They're 3-3. They lost at Illinois 9-6. Iowa can't score points. Losses include Iowa State, number 4 Michigan, and at Illinois. Wins include FCS South Dakota State, Nevada, and at Rutgers. They're averaging 14.7 points per game, which is 127th, but allowing 9.8 points per game, which is 3rd. That's the team that I was thinking of when I was reading off the stats of Iowa State. So both teams in the state of Iowa have great defenses, but terrible offenses. That's why the final score of that game was like 10-7. So yes, Iowa's stock is falling right now. Next team, number 14, Arkansas. Stock plummeting right now. They're 3-3. They lost at number 23, Mississippi State, 40-17. Losses include number 23, Texas A&M, number 2, Alabama, at number 23, Mississippi State. Wins include number 23, Cincinnati, South Carolina, and FCS Missouri State. So they've played 3 teams that were ranked number 23, and they're 1-2 against those teams. Number 13 is Miami. Their stock is plummeting right now. They're 2-3. Lost to North Carolina 27-24. Losses include at number 24, Texas A&M, Middle Tennessee, and North Carolina. Wins include FCS Bethune-Cookman and Southern Miss. They're averaging 32.8 points per game, which is 46th, and allowing 21.8 points per game, which is 43rd. The stats is what kept Miami from being higher on the list, but still, you're a bad team. Number 12, Oklahoma. Wow. Yes, their stock is plummeting right now as well. 3-3. Lost to Texas 49-0. Losses include Kansas State at TCU and Texas. Wins include UTEP, Kent State at Nebraska. They're averaging 30.8 points per game, which is 65th, and allowing 29.2 points per game, which is 88th. Oklahoma is a bad team. Number 11, speaking of bad teams, stock has been steadily dropping throughout the year, and that's my team, West Virginia. They're 2-3, but on a bye week. Losses include at number 17, Pitt, Kansas, and at Texas. Wins include FCS Townsend and at Virginia Tech. West Virginia is averaging 38.2 points per game, which is 24th, so they do have good offense, but they're allowing 29.6 points per game, which is 92nd. The defense is killing this team, along with self-inflicted mistakes. Now we're into my bottom 10. Number 10 is Arizona State, but their stock is slightly rising. They're 2-4. They beat number 21 Washington 48-38. That's what dropped them on my list. Losses at number 11 Oklahoma State, Eastern Michigan, number 13 Utah, and at number 6 USC. Wins include FCS Northern Arizona and number 21 Washington. They're averaging 27.8 points per game, with 78th, and allowing 30.2 points per game, which is 96. Defense is what's killing this team, but a good win against Washington. Number 9 Auburn. Stock is dropping rapidly. They're 3-3. Lost at number 2 Georgia 42-10. Losses include number 22 Penn State, LSU at number 2 Georgia. Wins include FCS Mercer, San Jose State, and Missouri. They're averaging 20.3 points per game, which is 112, and allowing 25 points per game, which is 60th. Brian Harsin is firmly on the hot seat, and if this continues, he will be fired at the end of the season or before the end of the season. Number 8 is going to be Missouri. They're also dropping as far as their stock goes. 2-4. Lost at Florida 24-17. Losses include at Kansas State, at Auburn, number 1 Georgia, and at Florida. Wins include Louisiana Tech and FCS Abilene Christian. They're averaging 25.2 points per game, which is 96th, and allowing 24.7 points per game, which is 57th. Missouri is a very, very bad team. Might be the worst team in the entire SEC. It's between them and Auburn. Oh wait, Auburn beat them. It is Missouri. Number 7 is going to be Michigan State. Wow. Dropping. That's what their stock portfolio looks like right now. But climbing in my bottom 10. 2-4. Lost to number 3 Ohio State 49-20. Losses include at Washington, Minnesota, at Maryland, and number 3 Ohio State. Wins include Western Michigan and Akron. They're averaging 25.8 points per game, which is 90th, and allowing 27 points per game, which is 74th. And I warned Michigan State fans that this was coming. Bad defense last year, bad defense this year, and you missed Kenneth Walker. Number 6. Now we're getting to the really bad teams. This is going to be Virginia. 2-4. Lost to Louisville this week 34-17. Stock, yes, dropping. Losses at Illinois, at Syracuse, at Duke, and Louisville. Wins include FCS Richmond and Old Dominion, averaging 17.8 points per game, which is 120. And their head coach was an offensive coordinator at Clemson, so he was thought to be an offensive guru. Defense is allowing 24.8 points per game, which is 59th, so not a bad defense, but they're still a terrible team. Number 5, Virginia Tech. Their stock has been plummeting all year long. They're 2-4. Lost at Pitt 45-29. Losses include at Old Dominion, West Virginia, at North Carolina, and at Pitt. Wins include Boston College, FCS Wofford. They're averaging 20 points per game, which is 116th, and allowing 26 points per game, which is 69th. Virginia Tech is an all-around bad team. Number 4 is going to be Boston College. The rest of these teams, just take this as a note. Their stocks are dropping, okay? Boston College is 2-4, and they lost to number 5 Clemson 31-3. Losses include Rutgers, at Virginia Tech, at Florida State, and number 5 Clemson. Wins include FCS Maine and Louisville. They're averaging 20 points per game, which is 115th, and allowing 29 points per game, which is 87th. So Boston College is just a little bit worse than Virginia Tech, because they lost at Virginia Tech. Number 3 is Stanford. They're 1-4. Lost to Oregon State 28-27. Probably one of their best games, though. Losses include number 10 USC, at number 18 Washington, at number 13 Oregon, and Oregon State. Their only win is against FCS FCS Colgate. They're averaging 29 points per game, which is 74th, and allowing 32.8 points per game, which is 110th. Stanford is a very, very bad team. Number 2, here we go. Northwestern, 1-5. Lost to Wisconsin, 42-7. Losses include Duke, FCS Southern Illinois, Miami of Ohio, at number 11 Penn State, and Wisconsin. Their only win was Nebraska, who recently got out of my bottom teams. But Northwestern is still firmly in my bottom teams. So now it's time for number 1. They've been number 1 all year long, and they will probably finish the year number 1, and that's Colorado. They are by far the worst team in all the Power 5 conferences. They're 0-5, but fortunately they were on their bye week. I heard that was a close score, but Colorado barely survived their bye week. Losses include TCU, at Air Force, at Minnesota, UCLA, and at Arizona. No wins, 0 wins, averaging 13.4 points per game, which is 129th. You thought Iowa and Iowa State's offense were bad? This is even worse. But they have a terrible defense to go along with that terrible offense. They're allowing 43.2 points per game, which is 130th. I don't know how Colorado got this bad, because in 2020 they actually were a really good team, especially offensively. But in 2 years, they have managed to become the worst team in all the Power 5 conferences. Y'all let me know in the comments section, do you agree with my list? Did I leave any teams out? And if you do disagree with any of my names that are on this list, let me know which ones they are. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on my next show.